Have you ever thought about writing a book? Have you ever thought about a way to share your story, but you didn't know where to look? You didn't know where to find just that right person that might work with you and have a true passion for giving back and being of service. Well, today I bring you Rob Anspach, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about him here in just a moment. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah.
Well, I am so happy you agreed to do this show. We have known each other for quite a number of years and have had the chance to go back and forth and talk about storytelling and writing books. And I know you've worked with a friend of mine, actually, a podcast guest that I had on, Jocelyn Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been a pleasure to see your journey. So I'm going to tell the audience a little bit about you, what you offer, and about how you can do so much in the world of marketing and building your own business. Rob Anspach is a seasoned entrepreneur, marketing consultant, prolific author, and podcast host with over 30 years of experience helping businesses build authority, craft legacies, and achieve long-term success. He is known for a no-nonsense approach to marketing and shares his famous Rob-isms, memorable principles like the cheaper the client, the more hassles involved, that have guided countless entrepreneurs in attracting high-value clients and avoid those unnecessary headaches. He's passionate about empowering businesses owners to recognize their worth, charge accordingly, and create enterprises built to last. As the host of the E-Heroes podcast, he interviews top-tier entrepreneurs, diving into topics like legacy, storytelling, and building business authority. And he's also the author of, I think it was 44 books or something along those lines.
Well, I'm the producer of 48 books, yeah, with
48.
14 on the slate for next year.
Oh my gosh, including his popular Rob Versus series, where he documents the encounters with scammers, showcasing wit and storytell prowess. So whether you're an entrepreneur, marketer, or simply someone passionate about building your lasting success, these are insights that I hope will inspire and inform. Welcome again, Rob.
Thank you. That was a mouthful. I mean, usually people just say, we have this guy on the show and he's just going to talk.
Well, a lot of podcasts do that. They just start off with just, going in right into the conversation. But I've always found it to be nice to read a little bit about people, because it's just a way for the audience to just get that little bit of, piece of what the show is going to be about and get to know you a little bit. And then it sort of frames the things that we're going to discuss, because I've already alluded to them a little bit at the top. But first off, I always ask my guests, and I know you don't have a military background, but I'm still going to ask, where were you born and raised, and how did you get into your early career as an entrepreneur?
Well, I was born in Lancaster County, which, if anybody's familiar with the Amish, with the movie Witness, Harrison Ford. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Amish all around here, although I'm not Amish. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. In fact, this is the 30-year mark. And I started my entrepreneurial journey. I started out having a video photography business that crashed and burned. And then I started a carpet cleaning enterprise, which I had for 19 years. Yep. And I overlapped that one. When I started Anspach Media in 2001, the two companies overlapped for many years. And I sold the cleaning business after I wrote my first book. And the first book was just all about social media. And so that's going back to 2013. And in that time, in those 11 years, we've produced all these books, not only for myself, but for my clients. And, when I look back at that first book, it took me probably a year to write it. And it wasn't the fact that, it was writing this book. It was the writing journey that took that long. I knew I wanted to write a book, but knowing and kind of forcing yourself to write it was the hardest thing. And it didn't hit me. I thought, I could just take all these blog articles that I wrote and assemble them into something that was sort of cohesive. And so I had this box of printed out blogs, and I kind of put them together. I'm like, no, it doesn't even sound right. And I ended up throwing everything back in the box and taking the box and threw it in the fire pit and set it on fire. I said, I don't want to use it. And I just happened to, that month, I won a marketing award, and one of the prizes was a trip to this conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. So when I was flying back from this conference, I jotted down these ideas, and that became the premise of my first book, which was called Share, 27 Ways to Boost Your Social Media Experience, Attract Followers. And it was the easiest social media book you'll ever read. I tried to shop it to other publishing companies, and everybody wanted these thick, boring. And I thought, I don't want to do thick and boring.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do something that's easy for somebody to comprehend. They can pick it up, put it down, read it whatever they want to. And that, I said, that's it. I'm starting my own publishing company. We put the book out, sold 2,000 copies right away. And I thought, wow, this is fun. This is just great. And so that gave me the courage to sell my cleaning business, just to go full time into my coaching. And then a year later, I wrote a book I co-authored a book called Optimize This, how 2 former carpet cleaners beat the search engines. And that book went #1 bestseller in like 4 countries. And it was like, wow, this is just phenomenal. And after that, everybody was, hey, Rob, can you help me with my book? Can you help me to do this? Can you help me? And so after all these years, I produced all these books, and people are just, they're just so happy that their books are finally out there.
Right. And what was it about your first book? What was it about social media? Like, why did that be the subject that you wanted to tackle? Was it because you had started doing the blogs and you saw how to market the blogs, and you wanted to share?
Everybody complains about Facebook shutting them down, cutting off their account. And I was frustrated because I had this cleaning business that I was trying to promote using social media. Facebook kept saying, you can't do that. And this was before all their so-called, community standards, which still nobody understands today. No. But I must have had my account shut down a few times. And it was just that sheer frustration of trying to learn the rules of not only Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. And there was a couple oddball social networks at the time, which don't exist anymore. But I was like, okay, how do I make this easy for other people? If I have all this frustration, how can I make it easy? And so that's what I did. And I'm like, okay, by utilizing these 27 simple ways of posting, you can create content, you can post, and you're not going to get in trouble with Facebook or any of the other socials. And, it was funny because about 6 months after the book came out, one of the testimonials I got on Amazon was like a 1-star. And it was like, Rob, all you're teaching people is how to share this, how to share that. Yeah, that's the title of the book. But I think it was that testimonial that hit me the hardest. I'm like, I'm not used to this. I'm not used to people giving me crap for something that, I created. And so I had to kind of reframe how I took these negative testimonials, because a lot of people, they won't look at all the good stuff. All the good stuff.
No, they don't.
They look at that one negative.
Right.
And I started making jokes about these and I started using these negative testimonials, which then helped sell more books.
I love it.
It was, you're never going to please everyone.
No.
In fact, there are people today that still send me an email or send me a chat, and they'll say, Rob, there's an error on page so and so. I'm like, did you like the book? No, I don't give a crap about the error.
You know what? It reminds me. Right now, we're sort of having an online conversation about the SecDef, and I've taken the. I think I'm definitely more leaning towards. I think this is a good nomination, and I think this person is a change agent, that kind of thing. And oh gosh, I have so many friends though that are on the other side, and I wonder, like, are they going to like me less because now I support this person, or I think that he might do good for the country. And
Right.
but I just, it goes back to what you said, Rob. You're never going to please everybody. And if you want to take a stand or have an opinion on anything or think about anything, there's going to be somebody that's not going to like what you have to say.
Well, and so over the years, that's what the Rob versus series became. I
Mhm.
would get these scam calls all the time. And at first they started irritating me, and I'd slam the phone down, and my blood pressure would go up. And I'm like, how can I turn this into a positive? And so
Right,
I
right.
started playing with them, and getting them aggravated. And so I would take these conversations and put them in the book. And so it was Rob versus the scammers, and Rob versus the morons, and Rob versus humanity, and Rob versus the entitled, and
How did you decide like which ones to do? Because I've read
well,
Rob versus the Scammers, and I love that one. That's the one where the people either email you or they call you, and you find very creative ways to keep them on the phone or make their lives a little more difficult. But
uh,
how did you
Rob,
decide which subject
Rob,
to?
when I did Rob versus the morons, I had all this extra content that never got into Rob versus the scammers. So I thought, well, this is just entirely going to be scammers books. So the Rob versus scammers just going to be scams. And then Rob versus the morons, I thought, well, let's just make that a separate book. Yeah, there's still going to be some scams in here, but you know. However, I made Rob versus humanity the third book, and I thought that was going to be the final book. And but it was just, that was the beginning of COVID, right? So I thought, yeah, everybody's losing their minds, and so it was Rob versus humanity. But after I finished the book, I had enough content for two more books. And
Mhm.
so I did Rob versus the entitled. The problem with that, when you put entitled on the book, it's going to trigger everybody that feels entitled. And so it was on Amazon for 6 months until someone complained, and then Amazon took it off.
Why? Because it said, they never gave you a. They said the word entitled was
Yeah,
offensive.
so they said someone was triggered by the book, so they had to take it down for. And then I had to get a human to actually analyze it and read it. And I said, it's part of the series. This is what it's all about. Oh, okay. And they put it back up. But how many sales did I lose because the book was taken off Amazon?
Wow. So
So
that's
uh,
insane. And really what these books are about is just the silly, stupid things people do
right.
that are unkind, or that they do it to pull power on you, or whatever. And you're just calling it out. And you're not even naming names
Yeah,
or any of that.
the people that are my friends, I'll name their names because they're good people. But the I never name horrible people in there. You know,
Mhm.
you protect the guilty. Well, that I don't want to get sued, but it's just people are so happy nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, they are. That's so
Although,
interesting.
although it was funny because I had the person I spoke about in the book, which I changed their name. They reached out and said, yeah, I recognize this story. This is me. And I'm like, just
And
I'm
then the
glad you
thing
bought
is,
the book.
and you know what, Rob, I always tell people is that they have a right to their story too. Like if
Mhm.
I'm speaking about a situation and they know it's about them, tell the same story
Yeah.
that's about you. And
Mhm.
that's fine. This is a free country. We have all freedom of speech, and you have a right to your lived experience that's different than mine, just as much as I have the right to my lived experience that's different from yours.
Yeah. Well, it's we all have freedom of speech until somebody feels triggered. Their feelings were hurt.
Oh gosh. So tell me a little bit about how the books evolved from your writing about your experiences and the things that you were seeing to working with clients and helping them write their books.
The first client that reached out to me was actually a Mexican gastric sleeve doctor, and
A gastric what?
gastric sleeve. So he takes like if you're overweight and you want to lose weight, he'll remove half your stomach.
Oh, okay, okay. Gastric bypass.
So
Okay, yeah.
it's so I suggested, he was making these YouTube videos, these YouTube shows, and I said, why don't we take some of these episodes and turn them into a book? And he goes, what do you mean? So I kind of sketched it out. He said, oh, I like that idea. This way, if people aren't watching YouTube, they're not watching his videos, they have a book. It's tangible. It's something they can take with them. And so we put the first book out, and his clients loved it. So we did a second. And then I wrote a third book, and then he changed directions. He I guess he wanted somebody else to handle it from that point, someone in-house down in Mexico, because I got tired of going back and forth. And I was okay with that. And I think every client needs to evolve. They need to be comfortable. They need to know how to write their own books. We give them the stepping stones. But, every book that I've done is different. Well, except the Rob versus books, they're all in serial.
Right.
Now, I do have a client now that we've done 7 of their books. And just like the doctor down in Mexico, we've taken episodes of his podcast. So every 52 episodes becomes a book. So he's in his 7th year. We just completed his 7th book, but his 7th book won't go out till next year because he's got all these podcasts that he pre-recorded and scheduled out. And the thing is that all these books, regardless if they were in a podcast, regardless if they were in a YouTube, people love books, and they love that reference that they can go back to in a book.
Right.
Yes, we have this technology that you can search and go on Google and find the exact episode that has the exact word that you want to look for. But people would rather pull it out of a book, read it, and they feel that they can trust the person who wrote that book.
Yeah. There is something so tangible about a book that I'll never really have with the podcast medium the way authors have with a book. And I do think that there is a level of critical thinking. I just had this conversation with a good friend that I grew up with when I was back in Columbus, and we talked about how if books are going to die out because of AI or because of podcasting, and she said, I don't think so, because with a book, there's this portion of your brain that has to be more creative and do a little bit more work as you're reading, because you're reading and you're still having to picture in your head that story or that circumstance. And you can picture it in any way you want. And that's a critical tool that is lost if you're watching a movie. If you're watching a movie, it's more immersive. Because I was like, well, because we were kind of going back and forth about, well, can't you just learn just as much from a documentary or from a podcast like what we're doing? And she was saying, and she's an artist and very creative herself. And she's like, no, when you read a book, it really does involve more critical thinking. And I never thought about it like that until we had the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I love to veg out. I love to be able to sit down and watch a movie. I like sci-fi. I like, one of my favorite shows is Stargate, because it mixes the Egyptian, science with science fiction. And so it's that critical thinking, and so a lot of the books that I create, I'm like, okay, one of the biggest challenges for me was 6 months ago, I produced a book for a client, and it involved coffee poems. I'm like, poems? I don't know anything about poems. And, he had these 81 poems and he wanted pictures with all the poems. And I'm like, first of all, having a book with that many pictures is very distracting.
Mm-hmm.
So let's chapter it 9 poems each, in each chapter, and just limit the amount of pictures to 9. And, after I formatted it all out, he goes, oh, that's great. I love it. I love it. And then the challenge was creating that cover that fit his personality. And, there's a lot of push and pull because I've done this process so many times, but every one of my clients has a different personality. So
Mm-hmm.
I might say, this looks awesome. I think this will work out, but their personality is way over in left field. And they're like, well, Rob, what are you talking about? I want to do it this way. I have to drop my ego. They're paying me. I'm like, there's certain things that I can get away with and say, yes, don't do it. And then there's things that I just got to bite my tongue and say, like, whatever.
Well, and I think that that's the creative process, because a lot of times you're probably also working with people that, like us all, I don't think we're all just driven to make money. This is our art. And so, I mean, I've had the same thing happen with me with this podcast. There's so many ways I could scale and do more things and spend more money and all these things. But at the end of the day, this is a passion project, and it's my next, and it's not going to probably change from that.
Right. And that's the whole concept with my eHeroes podcast. I started it as a way to teach, entrepreneurs, everybody I bring on the show. I consider them kind of eclectic. They do things their own way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people on the show that do things the same. I think,
Neither.
you've been on the show. I've had all kinds of great people on the show.
Denny was on your show.
And they're all unique, and they're all willing to share their superpower with my audience. And, I've never made any money on the podcast, but and I'm up to episode 324 or 25. So I've been doing it for many, many years, but it's my way of giving back. And I think there has to be a parallel to what we do. Everything can't be about money. Everything can't be about giving. There has to be
a balance
around. But I think that every entrepreneur worth its salt, or her salt, needs to go out there and give back in some way. And the podcast is my way of giving back. But the books are my legacy. It's the last book I wrote is called Legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we're going to talk about that. That's such a neat title, such a neat concept, and I love the way you kind of started the preface of the book about how at some point every entrepreneur gets to that place where it's not just going to be about the sales or the latest things that you're going to pursue. It's going to be about, well, how's what you're doing going to be sustainable when you're gone?
Yeah, I mean, most entrepreneurs think transactional, and every day they're like, oh, what's the next sale? What's the next sale? What's the next? But if you thought about your legacy, everything that you do is the long game. Like I said, I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. If I focused on that transactional stuff 30 years ago, maybe I'd be richer. However, when you look at things the long game, maybe it's not me that's designed to be a millionaire. Maybe it's my grandkids. They need to learn the lessons that I'm going to teach them.
But Rob, I also think that like maybe being an entrepreneur and finding your passion is is about being happy and having a tool, a craft. I mean, every time I do a podcast, I get better at lighting, or I get better at uh, how I ask questions. I eliminate my filler words. I used to say so many. Now I just pause and think of my next thought.
Yeah, well, I'm getting older, and some of those pauses are going longer and longer. And you know, my
Yeah.
grandson, who's 11 years old, he says, "Granddad, do I need to reboot you? You should learn this stuff."
So true, so true. But at the same time, I think that that's what the beauty of aging is. There's a lot of things not to look forward to in this aging process that we will all undertake. But the one thing that I think we do gain is this idea that like you said, it's not about the transactions. It's about the process. It's about forming the relationships. It's about getting better at the craft, and as you said, then it's about giving back
Mhm.
and doing what you can to help the people that are coming behind you. I feel that way about the communication community. I want to be a media critical thinker. And when I'm looking at certain news events that are near and dear to my community, like this SecDef nomination, for an example, I'm really looking at it through the lens of a communicator and how the communications of his nomination is portrayed. And everyone wants to get me into a battle about whether or not he opposes women in combat, or his qualifications and all these other things, and that is part of the story, but I'm always just looking at it from the frame of how is it being communicated, and how informed are the American people about this decision.
Mhm.
And that's fascinating for me because that's my craft.
Right.
um, so I think that you've sort of done the same thing with writing books. You started off writing your own books and then said, "Look, I can take this skill that I have learned, how to publish and how to take the things that I do well and turn them into a book. Could I
Mhm.
do this for anybody?" That's what it sounds like you've done.
And I've had a lot of clients, they'll say, "Well, Rob, I only have like 30 pages. What can I do with that?" And I said, "Well, send it to me. Let me see what you got." And I'll say, "Well, this is what I would do." And I would give them 10 different points and to expand out. And they're like, "Wow, never thought of that."
That's
And
awesome.
then, we'd add those things in, and we look at the book, reread it, and okay, well, let's switch some things around. And we can even eliminate some of the stuff that we added. But we'll take those 30 pages that they had and turn it into 135 pages.
That's
You know,
awesome.
and people say, "Well, Rob, why don't you write thicker books?" It
Hmm.
goes back to that. I don't want my books to be intimidating.
Hmm.
So whether it's my book, whether it's my client book, I try to keep them under 200 pages because one, it's an easy read. You look at the book and say, "Well, I can get this done in an hour or 2 hours, be done with it, go back and go on my day." But you have a book that's 5, 6, 700 pages. They're going to look at it and go, "I got to chunk this down, and it's going to take weeks," and they're going to lose interest.
Oh, I felt that way even reading about Elon Musk. I had this book, and you would think like, "Oh my gosh, he's the most interesting person in the world." But holy crap, you can only read an Elon Musk story and in him being Elon in every single capacity. And because he is, I definitely got a very good understanding of his personality, but I don't know if I needed that deep dive over every single aspect of his business. It was almost like the author was like, "I'm going to make a 600-page book because that looks sexy. And then
Right.
I'm going to find all these different angles to tell the same story about Elon."
Yeah, and
It wasn't
you know that
needed.
sometimes that's the battle I have with my clients. They want to include all these stories, and I said, "Yeah, but does the story that you want to add make your character any less authoritative than what it is?" They're like, "No, no, well, but it goes to the story." I'm like, "What story? Hey, take this out." And so I try to make sure that the books are thinner.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want all that meat in the middle. Sometimes it's you don't need it.
What I like about your books is that they remind me of what I had another talk with Kate Goggin about, and that's readability. And she even calls it plain language. I
Hmm.
guess there's a Plain Language Institute, and through the government didn't even know that they even strive to do this. But her writing is so simple,
Yeah.
and it is a pleasure to read. And I felt that way when I was reading your books as well.
You
There's
know,
just
it's called conversational writing, and it's just how we talk. We put it in print, so when people
Mhm.
are reading it, they're like, they feel like they're having this conversation with you.
Exactly. They
And
do.
so a lot of times when you write like that, most people will skim over all the mistakes unless they're a grammar teacher. And so, you know, they'll read it and they're like, wow, that was great. That was, you know, grammar
Right.
teachers going on red line, red line, red line. Rob, you're in trouble.
Well, that's where like the haters come in. And of course, we all have our haters, especially like I said, if you're a person who has an opinion. If you have no opinion on anything and everything is just sunshine and rainbows all day long, you probably won't get a lot of haters. But unfortunately, if you take any kind of an opinion on the internet, anybody who's on the other side of that opinion will sometimes get emotional. They will get triggered, and they will take it into a place that is just quite interesting whenever it happens, because I always try to have compassion for these people and empathy. And I think to myself, it's not about me. Like,
Right.
if disagreeing with me about an issue, disagree with me all day long. I love it, actually. I
Mhm.
have somebody the other day who disagreed with me about how policies get changed, and I said it's because of grassroots advocacy, and she's more of this idea that it's just the people who write the bills. And I'm like, well, they wouldn't be writing those bills if there weren't people on the
Right.
ground level who rise up and say something.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
yeah, but we
people
were
can disagree.
basically
People can disagree with me all day long, but they're
yeah.
wrong.
You're right, right. I like to say that too. But no, I'm actually really quick to admit when I've messed up or when there's a point on the other side. I'm certainly willing to concede to those points. And I
Yeah.
wish more people were like that, because I guess, and I never realized it until I went home, Rob, and I was hanging out with some of my friends from Columbus. All of my friends disagreed with me. Like, my two best friends that I grew up with, Becky Zimmerman and Mary McNeil, we were sitting around and having conversations while I was home. And they were just like, anything I said that I could tell, like they weren't just like agreeing. Like, and I thought, man, maybe that's how I kind of became this way, because I never had people around that just agreed with me all day long.
Well, you know, that's, you know, and if you read the Rob versus books, they're very sarcastic.
Yeah,
And
they're
so,
funny.
you know, I didn't put a lot of sarcasm in the first couple books. And I certainly don't put it in some of my clients' books because, you know, some of them aren't sarcastic at all. So I have to base it on their personality. And so when we're having these conversations, when we're having these interviews, you know, I try to infuse their books with their personality. And so it gets a little difficult sometimes because my brain wants to go, it's not funny. And so I have to discipline myself, you know, when I'm writing. And so it gets sometimes, and sometimes I have to, when I have I have two Canadian co-authors that help me with No Experience Necessary, which was another social media book, and Optimize This. And so when we are producing those, I said, you know, the majority of the readers for these books are going to be in the United States, not the Canadian market. But
Hmm.
you got to spell the words right. I'm like, you guys add U's to everything. So no, you know, or they don't, instead of a Z, it's an S. And it's like, but you got to remember your market.
Right.
And so, you know, I was actually editing a book from the UK, and I'm like, Rob, this is the UK market. This is not American market. So it's like, oh, I just wanted to correct all their spelling, but I had to reframe.
I understand. When I was stationed in London, I was working at Allied Maritime Command, and we had to write in what was called the Queen's English, which of course then became the King's English. And that was incredibly challenging. Luckily, we had a civilian from the UK as a journalist on staff. So, and she had prior news media experience. And so we were fortunate that her, and actually I had someone who worked with me that was in the US Navy, but from Britain. And she as well could easily correct everything.
Well, and their nuances are a little different too, because we'll say going to the hospital, and they'll just say going to hospital, something like that. And so some of their
mannerisms are different. Like like somebody, you walk into a store and they'll say hiya. That was one of them. Another one is there's not a line, there's a queue.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just little things that you learn in another country. And I think before I moved there, I thought things were going to be so similar. I thought it was going to be just like the US, but it is quite different there.
Yeah, and they're roundabouts. No.
Oh God. And then there's actually more roundabouts, I feel like, since I've been back.
They were, yeah. I mean, I was in Europe. I was in France in October, and I thought the roundabouts in southern France were bad until we got over to Toulouse, and it was like every other intersection was a roundabout. And we were going to this mall, and we go through a series of roundabouts, and there's a train that goes through the roundabout, and I'm like, what the
oh my God, that's bizarre.
And it was like, and then there was lights at a roundabout. I'm like, what are the lights here for? You know, you're supposed to be out. And if I hear the GPS tell me at the roundabout, take the second exit, my head's going to explode. I mean, it was just aggravating. I mean, but we're getting them here, and we'll see. Right.
So tell me, do you think anyone can write a book about their experiences?
Yes. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Now, the biggest challenge is writing that first book. And had I thought, 11 years ago that I'd have produced 48 books now, I would have said, no, there's no chance. I just want to get this first book out. And that's a lot of, I think that's the frustration a lot of people have, because they have all these ideas and they just don't know what to write about. And so what I do is I try to help them focus just on one subject, and then we can expand it out. What is it that you're really good at?
Right.
And sometimes, like with my first book, I wrote it based on the frustration I was having with social media, and I thought everybody else was having it as well. And I thought the book could help. Did it help my consulting business? Oh yeah, sure. But at the time, I wasn't even offering done for you, social content. So the book was kind of that catalyst that, hey, Rob, can you help me with my content? Because, I read your book, but I don't want to do it.
Yeah. Well, then
right. And then same with the SEO book. And then I wrote a book on how to be a better podcasting guest. I helped my friend with his copywriting book. And,
right. I read that book, actually.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
And so, that there's a lot of subjects that people have, even hobbies they have, that if they just took a few minutes to sketch down the ideas, we can expand them into a book very quickly.
Yeah. I think people think they have to be this like great writer, or they have to understand all the mechanics of storytelling in order to write a book. But I think that, like you said, with the right coach and the right outline, because that's what they need. They need the roadmap. And then once they have the roadmap, then it's just putting those ideas down on paper and then just piecing them together into cohesive sentences and making that story flow. I mean, when you think about it, and this is something that I always think about, Rob, all these famous people find a way to write books. How do they do that? They didn't all tell stories and write these amazing chapters and knew how to put together a book and a cover and table of contents. No, they have coaches.
Mhm.
They have
Yeah,
people they
and
work
they
with.
have ghostwriters, and sometimes the ghostwriters make more money than they do
Right.
because their book ends up in the 99-cent store, which I never
Sure.
want happen to my book. So, yeah,
Oh,
it just there is a process, and I try to keep it very easy, very doable. You know,
yeah.
nowadays I'm probably writing a book a month. You know,
Wow.
when I started, it was a book. Well, the first book took almost, like I said, almost a year. The second book, the Optimize This from concept to creation to #1 bestseller in 4 countries, took 60 days. We
Mm,
fast tracked that book. There was 2 of us writing. You know, typically I tell my clients a couple months.
yeah.
Look, we're going to start your book. This is the concept. You know, if you stick with me and
Hmm.
we get on these Zooms and we can get the content plugged out. I'm going to interview you. You're going to give me, all the answers, hopefully. Um, and then I transcribe all that and I pull all the information out. Then we make it into something cohesive, but it sounds like and then we chapter everything. And then you review it. And then we have an editor review it again because I always miss stuff.
Right.
And then we'll come back and say, does it flow right? Does this do this? Does it, are the dates that are they? And then we'll have maybe one of your relatives read it because maybe they remember it differently.
That's a great idea.
And so sometimes, there are things in there that need to be changed.
Hmm.
You want to, I just had this debate with a person I'm helping with, and they said, this is my school teacher's name. Do we want to change it? I said, are they still alive? They said, no, then don't worry about it. You know, but here's the problem with changing names in books. If you change one, you got to change them all.
Hmm.
And
But why?
then if you put a statement that says, blah blah blah, protecting the guilty, blah, names have been changed. People are going to wonder right off the bat: is what you just wrote fiction,
Hmm.
factual?
Yeah.
I even believe them. So you want to be as credible as you can when you're writing your books.
But you have to also worry. This is what I was my follow up was, if you do put somebody's name, it's your lived experience, but truth is subjective.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's somebody's version of the events. Did you ever worry about advising your clients about defamation?
Yes and no. Here we live in you know, a world where everybody can sue you,
Sure.
but do they have a case?
Yeah.
So yes, anybody can sue you, anybody can threaten to sue you, but until they actually do, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
And how many people are actually going to read your book that are going to pinpoint something out there that's this is
Right.
sue worthy?
Yeah.
So I think we can overanalyze, we can fear, we can say, well, you know what? Yeah, I'm not going to do that because someone will sue me. Then your story never gets told.
Right. But I think too, Rob, that you can say a supervisor, you can
Right.
write your story in a way that is not giving the identifying details. It's different with your family members or your best friends, but I think with coworkers and colleagues, I do think that there's some benefit to telling the story in a way that's general, where the point of the story is still salient, but you don't have to go into so much detail into the names of the people. So,
Mhm.
so because you don't want, the most extreme example that I can think of is the baby reindeer story, where the Netflix special, I don't know if you know what happened there, but a gentleman ended up outing a person who had been stalking him for quite a number of years, just by giving enough identifying details in the Netflix movies for sleuths to go onto line and know exactly who she was. And now she has a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Netflix and against the producer. And so that's an extreme example, but it's certainly something that
right. And it's nothing that anybody with way too much time on their hands couldn't detect, even finding through socials what we share.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So,
I mean,
I think we share too much. And granted, I wrote that book, back in 2013. And so my views on sharing on social have changed a little. I still think you should share things that you do in your business. Share your story, share your successes, share your joys and failures. But stop sharing some of your personal stuff. Stop sharing your dirty laundry. Nobody cares.
No, they really don't. Well, and if you're sharing and truly, like, if you're not sharing in a way that is a triumph story, that's how you triumphed over this situation, and it really should be more about your journey through that situation than about what anybody else did. That's how I always looked at sharing my story as well, because I can't control what goes on around, like what other people do, but I can control how I react and how my behavior is day to day, in reaction to whatever the events of the day are. And so I think that that's the stuff that we ought to share, because other people can learn from the ways we react to certain situations. And then, speaking of sharing, I do want to transition. You're not only just giving back in your blog, I mean, not your blog, but your podcast, and in the people that you work with and how you're helping them see their story. You're also, there's a nonprofit that you've been working with and helping. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's called Vet 21 Salute Honor Guard. And they do the honor ceremonies when a relative who is a former veteran died. So they're doing the 21 gun salute, or the how many gun salute they have when they're there. Because some people, they get confused. They think, well, am I getting a 21 gun salute? Well, if there's 5 members that show up that are there helping, and they do three volleys, it's a 15 gun salute. So, but they are getting that military honors, and a lot of times people forget, oh my God, my dad served. Oh, he could get this honor, and it's free. If you live in my area, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, or up in Indiantown Gap, and but they go through a lot of uniforms, and if you scan down, you'll see a lot of the members there are older. They did their time, they're retired, and they're giving back to the community by doing this awesome thing. All these guys and gals served in the military, and I have deep respect for the military. I wanted to join when I was 18. I was going to go nuclear Navy, but I couldn't because I was colorblind, or so they say. I can see colors, I just couldn't see the dots, and then that was the most horrible test ever. So when my father-in-law died last year, and he was a Vietnam vet, Vet 21 came and did the service, and it was beautiful. It was very honorable. And I reached out and I said, can I rebuild your website? Because the old website was just terrible. And so we rebuilt this new one, put a lot of attention into it, a lot of detail, a lot of pictures. But there's also a payment method, not really a payment, a donation method. So you can donate money to help them get new uniforms, attract younger members, and these guys are doing it out of the goodness of their heart.
It's great. I love it.
And so, if you have a member that served in any branch of the service, and you want to give them this honor guard, and I believe that there's other guards of different names in other towns. So you might, if you're not in Lancaster County, check them out. But go to their website, vet21salute.com, and donate. Help them out.
I have it up here on the screen. I think people can see it right here, and then there's the donate button right there.
And if you are a former military and you're in Lancaster County and you want to join, there's a join button. Learn more about them.
Yeah.
But it's a great group. I was there last month just to give them a report on the website and all the things that were happening. And they had 2 young soldiers from, I think it was Fort Indian Town Gap. They were Army, and they came out and they showed everybody the proper way to fold a flag. And each branch does it differently, but the way the Army does it just makes it so much crisp, and the corners tighter, and the flag looks more respectable. And so I took a video and I posted it on YouTube, and people just seem to really love that video. So it's
that's so cool.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's just not enough, because any veteran who passes away, as what I'm learning, is entitled, or I don't know if that's the right word, but is eligible for a 21 gun salute. But there's probably not enough units out there. So it makes me wonder if all over the country, people, if they wanted to, could form up and start a nonprofit. And what a wonderful way to give back as an older American or as a younger American, whatever, to get into.
I mean, like I said, it is supposed to be a 21 gun salute. However, depending on the members' availability,
sure,
you might only have 5, you might only 6. If you get a little bit more, great. They can do this honor for. But even if you have a 15 gun salute, most people aren't going to know. It's 3 volleys, but they're showing up at the funeral. They're paying respect, and it was just, it brought tears to my eyes when I was at my father-in-law's funeral, because these guys showed up. They had American flags everywhere. They were just doing their thing and paying respect. It was just phenomenal. So sometimes I love to be able to share those stories above my own. I wrote these books, I did this, I did that. That's great, but how can we help other organizations?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you, Rob. I think that there's just something that's so beautiful about being able to find these organizations that we can be a part of and give back. I can't wait till I retire very shortly, in the next year and 2 months, and I'm able to really give of myself to the organizations and the causes that I really absolutely love. And one of the wonderful things about having this podcast for the past year and a half is the fact that I've been able to, or actually 3.5 years, that I've been able to.
It was quick, doesn't it?
I swear, I'm plus my brain is just fried from all these moves and just being so in flux. But being able to learn about all the organizations and all the good work, like the one like Vet 21 and all these other veterans charities that exist. It's just a beautiful way that people are continuing to give back and to be of service. So for those of you who are listening, where can people find you and learn more about your services?
Well, they can go to my website. It's anspachmedia.com. And, you'll learn a little bit about who I am, what I do, and how I do it. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. I do dabble with TikTok, but I don't really, check. And don't even bother looking for me on Threads, because I think that is more toxic than Twitter.
You can't keep up with it all. That's
Mm.
kind of how I see it. I've tried a few times to go on X, because a lot of people on the veterans community goes on X to talk about the COVID mandate, which I find a little interesting. And there's, Elon's all over
Right.
X, but I just I got the channels that I have, and the biggest one I use is LinkedIn, and then the others sort of fall somewhere on the spectrum. I do Facebook and Instagram, and that's it.
The gurus like to tell you to be omnipresent. The problem is that you don't have time to be omnipresent.
No.
So pick a few of the socials that you resonate with, and just be there.
Yep, that's exactly what I do. I can't just be on every site, so I find the ones that give me the most fulfillment and best engagement, like the ones where the people are there that I like to engage with most, and that's the only places where
I get engagement in Threads, but it's just all drama.
Yeah.
And it was like, I posted something, and I must have got attacked by 100 different people, and I'm like, what the heck? My phone's blowing up. I'm finally turning off all the notifications, and I took the app off my phone. And I'm like, I don't need this drama.
No.
If they're saying, yeah, Rob, we believe in you. No, they were just trashing me, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't need this.
Yeah, you got better things to do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rob, it was wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm going to go full screen to do a closeout, but I will meet you backstage to say goodbye. And thank you again. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I am in our new home for a whole less than a week, and then hopefully we'll be getting over to that new house and getting that podcast studio going. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. I will be back at it next week. I think I will take a break right around Christmas time. But as I always say, to close out the call, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye now.